Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, it's the Friday show, and I'm Sam Sachs, half man, half news desk. And we begin in Washington, where the so-called Party of Free Speech is seeking to punish speech it doesn't like. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's killing, Republicans are going after people they deem to be too celebratory of the fascist's death. And this affects me personally because those are basically all my friends online. Louisiana Republican Clay Higgins, who talks like he got kicked in the head by a horse, tweeted this week, quote, "I'm going to use congressional authority and every influence with big tech platforms to mandate immediate ban for life of every post or commenter that belittled the assassination of Charlie Kirk." Oh, we're not allowed to belittle now, huh? Belittling is illegal now. Higgins didn't just stop at getting people kicked off social media for life. He wants to erase them from society. Quote, "I'm also going after their business licenses and permitting. Their businesses will be blacklisted aggressively. They should be kicked from every school, and their driver's licenses should be revoked. I'm basically going to cancel with extreme prejudice these evil, sick animals who celebrated Charlie Kirk's assassination." That's the punishment for making jokes online. These people get more triggered than pink-haired college liberals ever could. Not too concerned about Higgins, though, because he's just one crank congressman who's always mouthing off with something stupid. But the White House is also cracking down on speech, threatening to deport immigrants legally living in the U.S. if they, too, are found to be too gleeful about Kirk's killing. The Deputy Secretary of State Chris Landau tweeted, quote, "In light of yesterday's horrific assassination of a leading political figure, I want to underscore that foreigners who glorify violence and hatred are not welcome visitors to our country. I have been disgusted to see some on social media praising, rationalizing, or making light of the event, and have directed our consular officials to undertake appropriate action. Please feel free to bring such comments by foreigners to my attention so that the State Department can protect the American people." Protect the American people from what? Good jokes online? Come on. The list of things you can't say as an immigrant living in the U.S. is growing. It includes Free Palestine and now Kirk got murked. Conservative activists are also targeting speech they don't like. As Wired reported, reactionaries online are compiling lists of people they deem to be glorifying Kirk's murder. Quote, "A central hub of this activity is a website called Charlie's Murderers, which was registered in the early evening on the day Kirk was shot and is revealing certain personal information, such as social media usernames and email addresses of individuals the operators believe were celebrating the horrific murder. The campaign has been swift and widespread and has already led to at least one person losing their job and others receiving death threats." The right loves cancel culture, just as long as they're not the ones being canceled for being racists or being rapists. Now to Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who is using Kirk's death to attack Antifa. She introduced legislation to deem the group a terrorist organization, even though there's no evidence so far linking it in any way to Charlie Kirk's murder or any significant political violence whatsoever. Here she was touting her bill on notorious liar Benny Johnson's show.
But this is specifically a leftist ideology that has been calling people like us Nazis, fascists, everything else in between. They reject Christianity. They reject the concept of nationalism. They think that if you want a family that you're too trad and somehow anti-feminist, They oppress people, use minorities for their own causes to fundraise, and it's a hate movement.
Yes.
And so there has to be examples made. There needs to be massive punitive action against these people.
There needs to be massive punitive action against these groups and individuals who called me trad. As the Congresswoman realized that when you position yourself against a group that is positioned against fascists, that makes you a fascist. One last note on Kirk's killing in the aftermath. Political violence, turns out, isn't bad for business and investors. The U.S. stock market surged in the wake of Kirk's death. In particular, gun stocks jumped. Look at these spikes from Smith & Wesson, American Outdoors brand, Sturm Ruger, and Outdoor Holding Company. All gun companies, all profiting off the prospect of civil war. Someone who's good at economics, help me out here. Is this a sign of a healthy society? Now to Brazil, a country that actually knows how to punish corrupt politicians who try to destroy democratic institutions. The nation's Supreme Court found former President Jair Bolsonaro guilty of attempting a coup to stay in power after he lost his re-election in 2022. Bolsonaro ran the Trump playbook and encouraged his supporters to riot at government buildings to protest the election results. Bolsonaro has been under house arrest since August and now faces more than 27 years in prison. The news didn't go over well in Washington. Bolsonaro is a friend and ally of President Trump, who has called the prosecution of the former Brazilian leader a, quote, witch hunt. After the verdict was announced on Thursday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio promised retaliation. Quote, the United States will respond accordingly to this witch hunt, Rubio tweeted. The administration already levied tariffs on Brazil as a punishment for the prosecution of Bolsonaro. How about the US tries just minding its own fucking business on this one, huh? How about that? And finally, congressional Democrats are demanding answers from the Trump stooge heading up the Federal Housing Finance Agency, a guy named Bill Pulte. He's the guy who provided the claim basis for President Trump to fire Federal Reserve Board Governor Lisa Cook, accusing her of mortgage fraud. Pulte alleged that Cook claimed more than one primary residence on mortgage documents, unlawfully taking advantage of tax and rate benefits on a house she wasn't primarily living in. It's unusual that the head of the FHFA would lead such investigations because FHFA has its own office that is charged with policing mortgage fraud, and it did not initiate action against Cook. Pulte won't reveal how he was tipped off about Cook's mortgage documents, and it just so happens he also made similar claims against others that Trump deems to be political opponents, including Senator Adam Schiff and New York Attorney General Letitia James. It all suggests Pulte is rooting around the agency's repository of mortgage documents to find dirt on the president's foes. In a letter sent this week to the agency, Congressman Jamie Raskin accused Pulte of brazen abuse of power and added, quote, the American people have a right to understand why, in the midst of a housing affordability crisis, the FHFA director is primarily concerned with investigating the president's enemies rather than reducing housing costs for millions of anxious Americans. Pulte won't admit he's targeting the president's political rivals. Instead, he's just pretending to be tough on crime, posting things on Twitter like, mortgage fraud needs to stop. And he was quoted last month in an interview warning that if someone is claiming two primary residences, they will be referred for criminal investigation. Well, this could get awkward fast because, according to reporting from ProPublica, 3 members of Trump's cabinet have done exactly what Pulte accused Cook of doing. Quote, Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer entered into 2 primary residence mortgages in quick succession, including for a second home near a country club in Arizona, where she's known to vacation. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has primary residence mortgages in New Jersey and Washington, D.C. Lee Zeldin, the Environmental Protection Agency administrator, has 1 primary residence mortgage in Long Island and another in Washington, D.C., according to loan records. All 3 secretaries denied wrongdoing, just as Cook has done, because ultimately claiming more than 1 primary residence, while dodgy, is just some shit rich people do all the time, and it's almost never enforced. And when it is enforced, it's not by the Department of Justice. Instead, it looks something like this. Reuters uncovered that members of Pulte's own family also improperly claimed primary residence on 2 different properties. His father and stepmother, in fact, Mark and Julie Pulte, claimed primary residence at a house in Florida and 1 in Michigan. They were, in fact, renting out the home in Michigan. The news outlet inquired with local officials in Michigan about the records and were informed that the tax breaks on the Pulte's residence would be revoked, quote, as of today. That's usually how this stuff is handled, but Bill Pulte is more than welcome to refer his dad to the Department of Justice, just like he did Cook. Also, something else that's wild here. Pulte is 37 years old. That guy, 37, 3 years younger than me somehow. He looks like he's 54. More evidence that being a reactionary ages you real fast. Now to Georgia, where a judge tossed out the government's politically motivated and overzealous prosecution of Cop City protesters. The state's Attorney General Chris Carr brought racketeering charges against more than 60 people arrested for various activities in opposition to the proposed militarized police training center outside Atlanta. Some were accused of vandalizing police cars, others for raising bail funds. Some were arrested for just passing out flyers. The Attorney General hoped to group all the defendants together as part of a criminal organization and bring RICO charges against them, which could have carried penalties of up to 20 years in prison if convicted. But Fulton County Judge Kevin Farmer threw out those charges this week, claiming the Attorney General didn't have the authority to pursue the RICO charges. This ruling appears to be based on a technicality, though. Defendants are still calling it a victory, and it's a relief for many of them who've been unable to get jobs and housing with the heavy-handed prosecution hanging over them. For the government, this is a setback, but the heavy-handed prosecution itself was part of the punishment. And there are still others facing Cop City-related charges who aren't out of the woods yet, including 5 defendants who Carr brought domestic terrorism charges against. Their cases are for now still moving forward. The highly controversial Cop City project formally opened in May, pushed forward by the local government despite intense opposition from residents, civil unrest, and budget-busting cost overruns. If only the government pursued building libraries and public parks with as much enthusiasm. Well, gang, here we are again at the end of another Friday show. Good work, everyone. We got some very strong Rich Dick nominations on social media. A lot of you really wanted me to do it and give the dishonors to Kirk posthumously. But honestly, I said all I wanted to say about this dipshit's legacy on yesterday's show and already on today's show, so we'll just let the corpse rest for now. You're right, though. He was a rich dick by any definition. Here's another excellent nomination, Larry Ellison, who this week passed Elon Musk as the richest person in the world. The Oracle chairman is now using his fortune to build a media empire. His son, David Ellison, runs Skydance Media, which just recently merged with Paramount Plus, giving the family ownership of CBS News. The deal was only approved after a $16 million payment was made to President Trump by CBS. Well, it's now reported that the Ellison family wants to buy Warner Brothers Discovery and its entertainment portfolio, which includes HBO and CNN. To make matters even worse, the Ellisons are also trying to bring the loathsome Barry Weiss on board to direct CBS's news editorial line. And if the deal for Warner Brothers Discovery happens, she might also be overseeing CNN. You think the news is bad right now? It can always get worse. Thanks again for those nominations. Again, very strong. But ultimately, we're going in a different direction. This week's Rich Dick is Jerry Seinfeld. Seinfeld showed up at Duke University this week and made some truly heinous remarks. The school newspaper, The Chronicle, reported on Seinfeld's appearance at an event sponsored by the school's Chabad chapter. He shared the stage with a former Israeli hostage in Gaza, and he started mouthing off about the Free Palestine movement and said that it was actually worse than the KKK. I'm serious. Here's how the Chronicle quoted him. Quote, "Free Palestine is, to me, just, you're free to say you don't like Jews. Just say you don't like Jews. By saying Free Palestine, you're not admitting what you really think. So it's actually, compared to the Ku Klux Klan, I'm actually thinking the Klan is actually a little better here because they can come right out and say, we don't like blacks, we don't like Jews. Okay, that's honest." Really, Jerry? Really? Let's see here. On one side, we have a movement comprised of a lot of Jews, by the way, advocating for democratic rights for oppressed people and an end to a genocide. And on the other side, we have the KKK, a group that's murdered and terrorized blacks and Jews and other minorities for more than a century. In Seinfeld, he chooses the KKK. I mean, we're nearly 2 years into this genocide now. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed officially, unofficially, likely a lot more. Famine is sweeping across Gaza. Every reputable human rights group in the world has condemned what's happening. And hundreds of Palestinians have been killed in Gaza City over just the last few days as Israel targets residential buildings, Netanyahu calling them terror towers. And yet this motherfucker Seinfeld thinks the only people who could possibly oppose this carnage are anti-Semites. This isn't too surprising since Seinfeld has been supporting the genocide from the get-go. He traveled to Israel back in December 2023 to show his support for the campaign. Last October, he was at a Mets game in New York and had this message for a fan.
Let's go Reds! Let's go IDF!
Someone please inform the comedian that the IDF is an army that's currently under investigation for widespread crimes against humanity, and that this is the equivalent of saying, let's go SS in 1943. Back in 2018, Seinfeld participated in IDF training exercises in the West Bank, proving that his support for the apartheid and illegal settlement policies of the Israeli government goes back a long way. He's a scumbag, for sure. Listen, there are literally tens of thousands, if not more, Jewish Americans, including myself, who support a free Palestine. Maybe you should talk to one of them, Jerry, so that you don't keep saying extremely stupid shit in public. I mean, you've already thoroughly embarrassed yourself enough with that stupid Pop-Tart movie. Jerry Seinfeld. He's this week's Rich Dick. All right, friends, the show ends today with a sunrise from California. It was sent in by Larry near Mojave. Enjoy. Thank you, Larry. That's the show. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Find more MMN at means.tv. We also have YouTube and podcast channels, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. One day, capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.